Okay, let's begin. So we're on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. We're on page 13, 13b. And the Gemara that we learned um, was actually a review from the day before, from Friday. So I guess we don't really have to go over it. The Gemara that we're about to learn has to do with the the laws of um, when did they add the extra blessings into the Shemona Esrei, which means that on a fast day, uh, when they would have this big ceremony, so they would also include um, a number of extra blessings. Instead of 18 blessings, it would be 24 blessings, and they would um, they would make a big ceremony out of it. We're going to learn about it on the next parak, where it really goes into it. Here, we just what we did learn about it on page 12, 12b. We spoke about the other fast, the seven later fasts that were more strict, and we said there was Masriyan. They would blow the shofar. We'll soon see what Masriyan means, either blowing the shofar or a special prayer of Anenu, not the Anenu that we've been talking about, but a different prayer of Anenu. But basically, there were seven final fast days, communal fast days. If it didn't rain, that they would, that we would make a big ceremony out of. They would even bring the ark into the street, into the thoroughfare, and the square, the city square, and they would make a whole ceremony. So the question is, when do you add those extra prayers? Was it only the last fast days? Was it the middle fast days? Was it the first fast days? What was the difference between these three groups of fast days? We saw some differences in the Mishnah. Are there really more than that? In other words, we learned already about the differences if you can do work on a fast day, if you can take showers. We spoke at length about that. Take hot showers, cold showers, wearing shoes. So we've been talking about a lot of these differences of different types of fast days. So the question is, what was the difference between these three groups of fast days that they would fast for the rain when it didn't fall, when it didn't rain? What was the difference in these fast days? So difference in the different levels of stringency. And the Gemara, the way it starts over here is it deals with when a individual adds this extra one prayer called Anenu prayer. When you add it, do you add it in your own? Do you add it in your own Shemona Esrei in the just one of the prayers? You just slip it in, or do you make a whole bracha of its own? This is what the Gemara starts with, and it gets into the other discussion of the differences between the fast days and when do you add those extra six brachas. Okay, so let's begin. We're on page 13b, and we're going to start where it has the dot in the middle of the page, Sloisa de Tainisa, the prayer of the fast day. Sloisa de Tainisa, again, 13b, Sloisa de Tainisa. If you have an art scroll, I'll tell you where we are.
13b2.
13b2, the second column. The second column on 13b2. And thank you, Robert. That's where we're going to begin. So the Gemara's the initial discussion is about the Anenu prayer, and we know the Anenu prayer. We recite that Anenu prayer on a regular fast day in the mincha. In the mincha, again, there's discussion as to should one say it at the other prayers, but we say it at the mincha prayer, and we include it in the Shemea Tefillah. So just if you want to know the practical side of this, we actually say it in the Shemea Tefillah bracha. We sort of like slip it in there in our request that God listens to our prayers. We add a little prayer there for the including the fact that we're fasting. But the Gemara is asking, Sloisa the Tainisa Hechi Madkarinon, when do you include this prayer? Sloisa means prayer, the prayer of a fast day. When do you or where do you include it? And the Gemara says, Ad Berei Rav Yehuda Rav Yitzchok Berei. Yehuda was taking Rav Yitzchok, his son, for like a walk. That's at least a simple meaning. Yadber means to lead. So he was leading his son. And Vidarash, and he expounded, he darshaned, and he said, Yachad Kabbalah of Taanis, if an individual accepts on himself a fast day. So it says, Mispalel Shel Taanis, he davens this Anenu prayer. Where does this individual who accepts on himself a fast day, where does he include it? The Gemara says, Ben Goyel L'Roife, he would include it in between the bracha of Goyel Yisrael and Rifa'enu. He would include it in there and make a special bracha for itself. That would mean that he would recite a bracha. See, if you slip it in to a different bracha, fine, you don't need to make a bracha for it. But if you make it as an entity of its own, so it would take on a separate entity with a bracha at the end of it, and it would fit within the symmetrical style with the style of the rest of the Shemoneh Esrei would have its own bracha. So that was Rav Yehuda, his opinion, but his son didn't really agree with it. And Maskef la Rav Yitzchok asked a question, strong question on this. Does an individual, does he make his Shemoneh Esrei so? Is he so is it so important for him? Does it take on such a chashivas, such a significance that he's able to even add a bracha? In other words, a communal fast, I understand maybe the chazan, adds in a bracha of his own, but for an individual, it seems surprising that he would make a bracha, a special bracha, change the whole Shemoneh Esrei, like change the format, so to speak. The way Rashi writes it is an individual choshuv kol kach, is he so important that they should establish a bracha of his own to add in his tefillah. So the Gemara concludes Ella Amar Rav Yitzchok, that Rav Yitzchok says rather b'shemei tefillah. You slip it into shemei tefillah, you put it in there, and that's where you include the prayer called Anenu. V'chein Amar Rav Sheshas, and Rav Sheshas says the same thing, that b'shemei tefillah, you put it into the Anenu prayer. That's how we daven when we say, when we even have a public fast and we're davening our own Shemoneh Esrei, that's where we put it as well. And for sure, an individual, that's where you would put it in. But the Gemara is not satisfied. The Gemara says, Meisvei. They asked the contradiction to these two rabbis from a brisa. What does the brisa say? The brisa says, Ein ben yachid l'tzibur, an individual is no different than a community. Rather, Ela shezem espal Shemoneh Esrei, v'zem espal Shas. But the only difference is regarding a fast day is that one davens 18 brachas in their Shemoneh Esrei, and one davens 19 brachas in their Shemoneh Esrei. Now, the simple way to read this is that an individual davens a regular Shemoneh Esrei, and he adds a prayer for the fast day. He sort of slips it into the bracha called Shemei Tefillah bracha. That's the prayer, the bracha that's more like a generic bracha, and you can add or any request there. So an individual would say the Anenu prayer in the Shemei Tefillah bracha, not add a bracha of its own. And when it's a communal fast or a community praying together, they would the chazan this is the simple meaning. The Chazan would says it as a brach of its own. So in a public situation, they would do 19 brachas because he would add an extra bracha, and that would be for the Anenu prayer, and that would be between Goyel Yisrael, the bracha, the beginning part of the Shemoneh Esrei, the first half of the Shemoneh Esrei. There's a bracha Goyel Yisrael that we thank Hashem that He's going to redeem us. He's redeeming us, and then we have the bracha to heal us. So in between those two brachas, you would add a bracha of its own right called the Anenu bracha. Please answer our prayer for our fast day, and so on. For the people who just joined, we are on page 13b, and if you have the art scroll, it's 13b2, the bottom of the page, 13b2. So the Gemara here says that now we brought a brisa. Now, according to the way I translated the brisa, I said the simple meaning of it doesn't sound like a contradiction to Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshas. It seems like it could fit very well. Rav Yitzchok said, what was his claim? An individual does not make a special Shemoneh Esrei. You can add a prayer in Shemoneh Tefillah. You could, slip in a little prayer over there in the generic paragraph, but you don't change the whole Shemoneh Esrei. But when it's a congregation, then you change the Shemoneh Esrei. You can add a whole paragraph. Look, that makes sense, and that fits with Rav Sheshas. That's what the Brisa says, and that fits with Rav Sheshas. Because in Rav Yitzchok, because they basically say the same thing, that an individual doesn't change the whole Shemoneh Esrei. You can add a little sentence, a few sentences in the Shemoneh Tefillah, in the generic bracha, and a communal fast, they make a bracha of its own. The problem is the Gemara understands the Brisa can't mean that. The Gemara says, because we know that on a public community fasts, you're supposed to have 24 brachas. So we have to translate the Brisa differently, because the Brisa talks about 18 brachas and 19 brachas, and we know that on a public fast, there's more than that. There's 24 brachas. So the Gemara is therefore says that let's translate the Brisa, and then we'll see that it's a question on Rav Yitzchok and on Rav Sheshas. So the Gemara says, "My yachid." What does it mean, a yachid? Umay tzibor, and what does it mean, a tzibor? What is what does it mean, an individual, and what does it mean, a community? Ilema yachid mamish. If you want to say that a yachid means an individual, and a tzibor means a shliach tzibor, it means the one leading the service. So hani cha esrei. This that it says there's 19 brachas, esrin v'arba. There's really 24 brachas, and therefore you can't translate it that way, and we must translate it differently. Ela lav hachikam. Rather, it must mean something else. Ein bein yachid the kibbul of Taanis yachid. The Yachid Shekibel of Taanis Tzibor, the Ella Shezem Espalel Shmoina Esrei Zem Espal Chas. That what we mean is there's no difference between a individual who accepts on himself a personal fast or an individual who accepts on himself a fast similar to a communal fast. Rather, Shezem Espalel Shmoina Esrei Zem Espal Chas. The only difference is that when you accept on yourself a individual fast, then you only say 18 brachas, and you could say the Anenu inside the Shemoneh Tefillah. But if you accept on yourself to do a communal fast, then you need to add a new bracha of its own. So the Gemara is translating this brisa different than the simple reading of it. And what we're concluding is a very simple thing, that if you accept on yourself a personal fast, you're fasting like a personal fast, then you, in other words, you could accept on yourself two types of fasts. You could say, I'm accepting on myself a fast similar to a personal fast, or you could say that, you know what, I want to make a special type of fast day, and I'm going to accept on myself a fast similar to a communal fast. And it would take on more stringent rules. Now, when you accept on yourself an individual fast, the Gemara understands then, yeah, say the Anenu prayer in the Shemet Tefillah in the generic bracha, and you don't say a special bracha of its own. You don't add a whole thing. No, you're making an individual personal fast. But what happens if you accept on yourself a communal fast? When you accept on yourself a communal fast, in other words, you're saying, I want to make a fast, I want to have a fast day that's more strict, and it's going to be called a similar to a communal fast. Then the Brisa is basically telling us, you know what? You're going to say an extra bracha. You actually change the Shemona Esrei. You change a little of the format of the Shemona Esrei. You add a whole new entity inside that Shemona Esrei with an extra bracha. Instead of 18 brachas, it's going to be 19 brachas. So that is the the understanding of the Brisa. And now you can understand that it actually contradicts Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshis. How does it contradict Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshis? Because Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshis both said that an individual never says a bracha of its own. You never change the Shemana Esrei. And here we see that there are cases where you do change it. If a person accepts on himself a public fast day, meaning he's going to take on a fast day that's similar to the rules of a public fast, he's accepting on himself an extra strict fast. And such a fast day, he actually makes a bracha of its own right, anenu, and he puts that bracha in between the bracha of Goyel Yisrael and Rifa'enu. He puts it in the middle of the Shemana Esrei, not as a sort of like inclusion in a generic bracha and part of the Shemana Tefillah bracha. No, he changes the format of the Shemana Esrei because he's accepting on himself a special strict type of fast day. That's the way the Gemara understands it. And this would be a contradiction and a proof that Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshis is wrong. So Shema Minah, the Gemara says, we hear from this that that Yachid is Kaveh Bracha Liatzmai, that an individual establishes a special bracha for himself, even though he's not in the community prayers, he's not leading the prayers. A Yachid does establish a bracha in its own right. It makes a special bracha of the Shemana Esrei. That's what the Gemara sees. It says, and basically what the Gemara is saying is that it's possible to do such a thing. Individual is considered important enough to actually change the format. Yes, Ben.
So before they said it's no big deal. We just added before this, between this, and that's it. Now they say, no, there is. You're changing from 18 to 19. You make it separate.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure what you're saying, but basically, if you
before they said, you just stick it between the lines, between this and that.
No.
Now we say no. It's 18 and 19. You're adding a prayer.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly that. Before, what they said was, don't stick it. Don't it was stick it inside a bracha, not in between this and that. Stick it inside one of the other bracha. Yeah. Okay. You would initially, in other words, they're claiming you're always stick it inside another bracha, the generic bracha. Put it right there and don't make an entity of its own. And we see from here that there are cases. Now, it's not saying every case you do this. It's saying that there are scenarios where you would, and that would be if an individual accepts on himself a specially strict fast, similar to a Taanis Tzibor, similar to a communal fast. That's what the Gemara is understanding. Now the Gemara says, loy, no, you got it wrong. Lo'olam emalach, really, I'll tell you that Shliach Tzibor, we're talking about the leader of the Chazan, the leader of the service. And this that you asked about the 24 brachas, Shliach Tzibor Esen Biarba Matzli, that the Shliach Tzibor davens 24 brachas. So you said this can't be talking about the simple meaning of the brisa, that it means the chazan, that he's going to say 19 brachas. It can't be because he's supposed to do 24. The Gemara says no. He doesn't all communal fast days do 24 brachas. The Bigam Rishayim Taanis. We're talking about the first three, the Leka Esher and Bayarba, first three fasts when it doesn't rain. Those fast days are not. They don't have all the bells and whistles of the later fast days. They they have they're lighter fast days, as we've seen. They start by day. They don't include a person can wear you can wear leather shoes. You can have marital relations. They're much more lenient, those first three fast days. And in those first three fast days, you also don't do the 24 brachas. So the understanding of the Gemara is that we could translate the brisa the way we wanted to initially. That it just means simply that when you have a shliach tzibur, he adds the anenu prayer as a bracha, an entity of its own. When a chazan repeats the Shemoneh Esrei, and when a individual says the Shemoneh Esrei, he doesn't make a bracha of his own. And the same thing would apply if an individual accepts a fast day on himself. He doesn't. He's not going to make a bracha in its own right. He takes the anenu and slips it into the Shema Tefillah, the generic bracha that includes everything, and you just include a few sentences there about with the anenu. And so that would be the simple meaning of the brisa, and that is that's the simple meaning of the brisa, and then it doesn't contradict Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshes. So the Gemara says that
Rabbi,
yeah.
So the 24 blessings they mentioned, is that what Anenu is adding, the several other blessings?
We're gonna see it. It's in the beginning of the next parak. It's on page 15, and we'll see all the brachas, which they are, and so on. So the Gemara then says, "Veloy, do you not add the extra brachas on these communal fast days that are the first three? You don't say 24. Ein bein katani. The brisa says ein bein. Now from Tractate Megillah, right? Yeah. That there's a lot of ein beins. You had a whole probably a few weeks of ein beins over there. Ein beins means the Gemara, the Mishnahs over there. They compare different laws, and they say there's no difference between this law and that law. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur, except for this and this. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov, except that and this and that. They go through all the different ein beins. There's no difference. Now, the Gemara here is quoting a brisa. The brisa says, what does the brisa say? The brisa says, "Ein bein gimel rishonos legimel emtsoyos." Read inside. V'loy v'ha'ein bein katani. It says ein bein, and what does it say? Ein bein gimel rishonos legimel emtsoyos. There's no difference between the first three fasts and the middle three fasts. Elo shebe'elu mutarim b'asiyas melacha. But the only thing is that on these three, you're permitted to do work. But these three, you're not allowed to do work. Now, we saw that the Mishnah that we learned on page 12 talked about the prohibition of doing work on the fast day. And we had a Gemara, the Brisa mentioned it doesn't apply at night, it only applies by day, but it was talking about the second set of fast days, right? The second set of fast days, we said you're not allowed to do work. So they wouldn't work on in fact, the Gemara even asked, work is not pleasure. Why can't you do work? Right? Remember that question of the Gemara that said, why can't you work? It's not pleasure. The Gemara answered that we learned Batzeres, that it's similar to Atzeres, similar to Shmini Atzeres or Shavuos. You're not allowed to do work. The Gemara understood that you can't that you can't do work on the second set of the fast days, but the first set of the fast days you could do work. So when the Brisa says the Brisa says that Ein Bain, there's no difference between the first set of 3 fasts and the second set of 3 fasts. Again, we're talking about the rain, fast for rain. There's no difference between these 2 sets of fast days, but these you're allowed to do work, and these you're not allowed to do work. Which ones are you allowed to do work? The first ones you're allowed to do work. The second set, you're not allowed to do work. So that's the only difference. What does that sound like? So Gemara says, you see that those are the only that's the only difference. Now, the Brisa does continue. I have to make it clear. The Brisa does continue that there are a few other differences, like, for example, wearing shoes and having marital relations. So there are more differences, but this is the initial statement of the Brisa, and it does not mention, and this is the most important part, it does not mention the 24 brachas of the Shemoneh Esrei. It mentions this, and it mentions some other laws, but it doesn't mention the 24 blessings. So what does that sound like? It sounds like that they're both the same. If the middle ones you say 24 brachas, the first ones you also say 24 brachas. And if you say the 24 brachas on the first fast days, then what ends up happening is this will knock off our translation of the Brisa, and it ends up that we'll have a question on Rav Yitzchok and Rav Sheshis, and it'll end up that when that an individual, what'll end up after you prove everyone, you use this proof, if you have to translate it differently, it'll end up that an individual will be able to say Anenu in his own Shemoneh Esrei as a bracha of its own right. That's what it'll end up after you prove, after you use this as a proof, because you'll now. So what the Gemara is basically building, it's trying to prove, like, what, if is it true what we said? Because if not, we're going to knock off everything we just explained. So is it true that you don't say the extra brachas on the first 3 fasts? But we have a proof that it seems like you do say all 24 brachas, which means an extra 6 brachas that you would say on even the first 3 fasts, because the Gemara says, because the Brisa says Ein Bain, there's no difference. The first 3 and the second 3, they all seem to be the same. And if the second 3 you do these extra brachas, so then the first ones, it says, seemingly you would also do those, because it says Ein Bain, there's no difference, and it only mentions other differences. It doesn't mention this difference. So the Gemara says Halachaf Daled Zevaz Hashaman. So from that Brisa, sounds like with regard to the 24 brachas, they're both going to be equal, and so this seems to prove wrong what we just explained, and how we said that there's a difference between the first 3 and the others, that the first 3 doesn't have 24 brachas. So the Gemara answers, and it says Tana B'Shire, that the Brisa that says Ein Bain, there's no difference, it learned a number of differences, or taught, I should say, a number of differences, V'Shir, and it left out a few. Now, sometimes, you might tell someone, the difference between this and this is this and that, is this. And really, there's more differences, but you mentioned one of the main ones, or, an important one, and it's correct, but you left out a few. So it happens. You might tell someone, well, this is, you didn't necessarily say all the differences. You said one. Now, the only thing is, the Gemara says, and this is throughout the Shas, generally, if you're going to miss out, then you miss out more than one. You don't just skip out one thing. If you're saying all of the differences, then you say all of them. If you're not saying all of them, but you want to bring out a point, fine. So you said one difference, and you left out a few of the others, because it's not, of course, there's other differences, whatever. I'm not saying every single detail. I'm saying the main one. So if you're going to leave something out, you leave out more than one. That shows that you're not specifically excluding it, but that you just weren't weren't so exact in your words. So the Gemara often wants to say that when it says ein bain, there's no difference, or it uses another term that sounds the same idea. It's possible that it wasn't so specific, it wasn't so exact in its wording. But if so, you'd have to find another example as well. So, you know, it would be like, would be a good example. You know, if I would say the difference between my shirt and Ben's shirt is that his shirt is, you know, it's checkered, right? But the truth is, there's more differences. His shirt is 100% cotton. Mine is 60-40. You know, the other difference is mine has a stain on it. His might be more differences. The main difference is that it's checkered. You know, that's what you see. So I might have just said the difference is that it's checkered and mine isn't. But there might be some other. Now, if I said every detail, but I skipped out one, then what it would end up being, like, let's say I didn't mention that mine has a little stain in his dog, but I mentioned every other detail. So then you would say, you know what? Probably Ben's shirt also has a little stain, and that's why I didn't mention it. You know, there's a reason why I didn't mention it. But if I'm just mentioning the main thing, so fine, I mentioned that his shirt is checkered and mine is white. I'm just mentioning, you know, that's what's the most important difference. But really, there's more differences, and I skipped out a few of them. It's not like I just skipped out one. I skipped out a few because I'm not really dealing with that. So the Gemara here is dealing with that type of a style of wording. The Gemara says, ein bain, there's no difference. Okay, there's no difference. What about the 24 blessings? There's no difference. The first 3 fasts and the second 2 fasts. It says no difference except for the doing work and some other differences. But it doesn't mention the 24 brachas. So they must be the same. They both, the first fast and the second group of fasts, they all have 24 brachas. No, maybe it skipped out that. We didn't mention the 24 brachas. The Gemara says, so if so, my shear, the high shear. If so, then what else did it leave out? If it wasn't so exact and it left something out, it must have left other things as well out. What else did it leave out that the difference between the first set of fasts and the second set of fasts? And the next few words they leave out because it's pretty obvious with su, v'hayin, bein katani. So the Gemara then says Ella Tana be'isure kamayru. Rather, the Tana is talking about prohibitions, and it's saying, you know what? The difference between the first set of fasts and the second set of fasts is if you can do work, if you can wear shoes, if you could have marital relations. These are the differences between the first set of fasts and the other set of fasts regarding prohibitions. But we're not talking about what davenings you do, if you do a different davening. But tefillah is like we're not talking about davenings. So therefore, it could have left out something because it's not saying every detail. It's specifically talking about a certain dimension of it. We're talking about that dimension, the dimension of prohibitions. There's no differences except for work, and that's what we're emphasizing. We're dealing with the work and the other things, and we're not talking about davening. So davening you could leave out. So that would be an area where you could that's a way to answer such a question from an ein bain, where it says no differences. It could, if it's talking about a certain specific field, it's talking about prohibitions. So you could say, okay, so it's not talking about davening. Therefore, it skipped out davening because we're really not talking about it. So that falls into a whole different category. We're talking about the category of prohibitions, and this is not in that category. So therefore, it has nothing to do with it. The Brisa was not talking about davenings. So according to this answer, everything fits well. Right? Sounds good. We've got an answer now. We understand that there are not 24 brachas on regular fast days, only the special fast days, like the second set of the rain fast days, and the third set. The first one doesn't have that, and therefore the Brisa, when it talks about an individual fasting or a shliach or a Taanis, a tzibur, or when it says the wording of the Brisa was tzibur, that when there's a fast, a tzibur or a yachid fast, it's not a problem to translate it simply that an individual always only says 18 brachas, And a tzibor, meaning the chazan, always makes it a 19th bracha. You could translate it that way because there are 19 brachas for a regular fast. There are other more extreme fasts that have 24, but it's not like you don't have fasts that are 19 brachas. That a shliach tzibor would do 19 brachas, and that would be that he's not. It's not a fast day like the later fast for the rain. It's a regular fast day, and there are such cases. For example, the first three fasts. In the first three fasts, you don't do 24 brachas. And even though the Brisa says that the first three fasts are very similar to the second three fasts, and there's no difference between them, that's talking about regarding laws of prohibitions of what you're not allowed to do on the fast day. But it's not talking about davening. In davening, there is a difference. In davening, the first three are different than the others. The first three do not you don't add those extra bucks. So that's the way you could answer. But then the Gemara gets into a whole new discussion. And of course, this is going to what you may say opens up like a whole can of worms, because now we're going to jump into a whole back and forth, a little complicated. And the Gemara wants to say, what about the middle three? Maybe the middle three fasts, you also don't do the 24 brachas. Who says that the middle ones you do? Maybe it's only the last ones that you do 24. And so if you want to answer this, if you want to say this, it also would work. It would work. But the only problem is, can you say this? Does the middle three fasts, do you have 24 brachas? So the Gemara says, if you want, you could say, that in the middle fast, you also don't do 24 brachas. And so that would actually answer the Ein Bain question that we said there's no difference between the first set of fasts and the second set of fasts. And we didn't mention about the 24 brachas. You know why it didn't mention the 24 brachas? Because there's no difference between the first set of three and the second set of three regarding the 24 brachas. Even the second set of three fasts don't have 24 brachas. It's only the later set of fasts that have the 7 fasts later. They have the 24 brachas. The second group doesn't have 24 brachas. The second group only has also 18. And then, of course, the Shliach Tzibor adds 1 for 19. So even the second group is also not 24 brachas. And therefore, you can't ask any question from this Ein Bain. There's no difference between the first group of 3 and the second group of 3. Why didn't it mention about the 24 brachas? You know why? Because neither of them have 24 brachas. That would be also a very good answer if it works. The Gemara is going to deal with that and question that. Can you say that? Can you say that the second group of 24, can you say that second group of fasts does not require one to recite the 24 brachas, does not require the Shliach Tzibor to say the 24 brachas? The second group of fasts, you don't say the 24 blessings of the Shemona Esrei, you don't add those extra brachas. But we learned in a Brisa, and now comes a new Ein Bain. It's a different Ein Bain. This is another Brisa that says Ein Bain, the same words. Ein Bain, there's no difference. Bein Gimel Shniyos, between the 3 middle fasts. L'sheva Achroinos, in the 7 final fasts for the community. Ella, rather, what's the only difference between them? Sheba Elu Masriyan, v'nayal enasachanius. On these, we do Masriyan. Masriyan means you... again, the Gemara will say, but it means blowing the shofar or say a special type of prayer, and you close the store. So those are the differences between the second 3 and the last 7. There's a difference between those fast days, meaning both of them are very stringent, very strict rules. And you start from the night, you start fasting, and you're not allowed to have marital relations, you're not allowed to wear leather shoes, you're not allowed to anoint oneself. They're very strict fasts. But there is a difference that the later ones are even more strict, that you have to close the stores and you have to do the masriya and the crying out. So the question is, what about regarding the 24 brachas? But regarding everything else, zeh v'zeh shavin. They're both going to be equal in regard to, they're both going to be equal with regard to the 24 brachas. It sounds like even on the middle three, excuse me, even on the middle three fasts, you also say 24 brachas, because we know for sure the last 7 you say 24 brachas. And here it says ein bain, there's no difference between the middle 3 and the last 7, except some other things. But it doesn't say about the 24 brachas. It means the 24 brachas are the same. That means you're going to say the 24 brachas even in the middle 3 fasts, which would contradict what we just wanted to say, that even the middle 3, you don't do the 24. Here it sounds like you do, because it says ein bain, there's no difference between the last 7 and the middle 3, and it doesn't mention about the 24 brachas. What will you say? Maybe it left out something, right? Maybe it wasn't so exact. So the Gemara says, here also, maybe you'll say that Tana, he taught differences. The Shir, and he left things out. Maybe you're going to say, here he left things out. But it says that there's no difference. So in other words, it would seem to, it would seem that it wouldn't have just left this one thing out. The Gemara says, "B'tizbra, do you think ein bein davka, that it's so exact?" There's other things that it left out, and here we turn the page. We're up to page 14a. 14a, everyone. Vaha shir teva. It left out that there was a special rule that the last 7 fasts, they take the ark from the shul and they bring it to the public area, the town square, and they make a big ceremony there, and with prayers, and this was done on the last 7 fasts. Now, it wasn't done in the middle 3 or the first 3. It was done in the last 7. Now, the Brisa mentioned that there's no difference between the middle 3 and the last 7, and it didn't even mention the teva, the difference between bringing the ark to the thoroughfare, to the square, to the public area. It didn't mention that, and so what we see is that it wasn't so exact in what it was emphasizing, that there's the difference between the two. It wasn't so exact because it left out other things as well. So it might have also left out the 24 brachas. But could be that there's other things that it left out. Left out the teva, left out the 24 brachas. So therefore, we can't say that it's so exact. You can't bring any proof from this brisa that the middle 3, they also said all 24 brachas, because it doesn't mention it as one of the differences. It didn't mention other things as any of the differences, didn't mention all the differences. So therefore, it could have skipped this as well. And therefore, maybe there is a difference between the middle 3 regarding the 24 brachas and the last 7 regarding the 24 brachas. That maybe the last 7 says the 24 brachas. Could be the middle 3 doesn't say it. It left out that difference because it left out the difference of teva, of the ark as well. The Gemara says, no, that's not really leaving. That's not a difference. Imishum teva, if you want to say that it left out the teva, the ark, lav shiuruhu, that's not really called a difference, because that's a public thing. Everyone sees it. You don't have to say it. And when you mention differences, you mention things that are more not so clear, not so visible. You talk about the bringing the ark, or they would make a whole ceremony out of it. Everyone knew that. So it's like if you say the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur, everyone knows, of course, that you fast, right? You're not going to say that that's the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur, fasting. You could say that there's a difference, there's a specific difference in law, maybe that one is more strict than the other in a certain thing that most people don't know, but everyone knows the difference Yom Kippur and Shabbos is the fast. So in other words, you talk about the difference between the first 3 fasts and the middle 3 fasts and the last 7. Of course, the difference of teva, that you bring that out. That's a mili de farhesya. That's something of public. Mili de tzina katani. We're talking about things that are done in private, that are done indoors. Mili de farhesya like katani. We're not talking about things that are done in public. That it's not going to mention that difference. So the thing is that it should have mentioned the difference of the 24 prayers. It doesn't mention it could skip out teva, because that's something that is a very public matter, that very well known and public. The fact that they would bring the ark out. So that it didn't mention in the differences, but it should have mentioned the difference of the 24 brachas. And the fact that it didn't mention the difference in 24 brachas sounds like the middle group of fasting says all 24 brachas. Now, the Gemara now says, you know what? Let's bring a proof from the Mishnah. The Mishnah maybe also implies that the second group of fasts, you add those 24 brachas. Amar Ravashi, Ravashi says, Masnisin nami deka. The Mishnah also seems to be meduyak, imply this same rule that you would, like we're implying from the Brisa. Again, it's not clear. We're still not 100% sure, but we seem to have a proof from the Brisa. The Brisa says ein bain, says there's no difference, and it doesn't mention the 24 brachas. Sounds like the middle three also have the 24 brachas. You add those extra 6 brachas to the Shemona Esrei. It sounds like that from the Brisa. And then Rav Ashi wants to say, the Mishnah maybe also sounds this way. Diktani, it says in the Mishnah, Ma elu yaserais al harishainos, that just like in what way are these different, these 7, different than the earlier 3, meaning the middle 3? How are the later 7 different than the middle 3? The Mishnah says that in these, it uses a similar idea like ein bain. So the Mishnah and the Brisa seem to say the same thing, that what's the difference between the later 7 and the middle 3? But the difference is that in these, the later 7, you do the Masriyan, which was the shofar, the extra prayer, Nayel and Asachanuyos, to close the stores, but it does not mention the 24 brachas. And everything, every other matter, they're both equal. And if you want to say Hachanami, here also, Tana Vesheir, you want to say there's also like left out, it left some things out. It didn't mention every single difference. It says similar to words like ein bain, there's no difference. In what way are these different? It says ma elu katani. It says what way, what is the difference between these two? So you see again this idea that there seems to be no difference between the later 7 and the middle 3, and even the middle 3 probably also they would say all 24 brachas. The Gemara says, really, V'tizbra? Do you really think so? Ma elu davkahu? That you would think ma elu is very specific, just like the ein bain. V'hashir la teva, but it left out the teva, the ark. Again, the same claim that we had before. It left out ark, so maybe it also left out the 24 brachas. If it left out another thing, it could also leave out ark. And basically what we'll say is it's not telling every single detail and difference. It mentioned one of the main differences. It didn't mention, or 2 of the differences. It didn't mention all of them. It left one. It left other things out. It left out the ark. It left out. It didn't mention about the 24 brachas. So the rest is yes.
What does it mean they left out the ark? I missed that whole thing.
Oh, they left out the mentioning the difference between the middle 3 fasts, where they do not remove the ark from the synagogue and bring it to the public square, and the last 7, where they do take the ark out from the synagogue and bring it to the public square and make a whole ceremony there. So the Gemara is basically saying that when we mentioned, we had a brisa that said there's no difference between the middle 3 and the last 7, except for blowing shofar, and it mentioned a few differences. And the Mishnah said a similar line, that how are the last 7 different than the middle 3? And it also mentioned the same thing, that the last 7 you blow shofar, you masriyan, you close the stores, and both of these sources do not mention other differences. They don't mention the difference of the 24 blessings, which is of course subject to our discussion. Is there such a difference? Do you actually add 6 brachas to the middle fasts from an esrei, or is it only on the last 7, or is it both? In other words, didn't mention that difference about the brachas, which there might be a difference, and there definitely is a difference between the teva. If you bring the ark to the public square, it skipped that out. So if it skips out more than one thing, then we sort of like say, you know what, you can't bring any proof from there because we see it skipped out the ark. It didn't mention the difference that the ark on the last 7, you bring it out. The middle 3 fast, you don't bring out the ark. Why didn't it mention that? If it didn't mention that, it could also skip out other things. It didn't mention that difference. So therefore, maybe it also didn't mention the 24 fast difference. And therefore, it could be that there's a difference between the 24 blessings for the fast. It could be that the middle 3, you don't say the 24 blessings. You only say a regular Shemoneh Esrei on the middle 3 fast. The later fast, the 7, the last 7, that's when you say the extra brachas. That's what the Gemara is basically trying to figure out. Do we add 24? Do we add an extra 6 brachas to the Shemoneh Esrei in the middle 3? And we have these sources that talk about the difference between the middle 3 and the last 7, but neither of them mention this 24 brachas difference. That maybe the middle 3 you don't say the 24, and the last 7 you do. No one says that difference. But then again, when it talks about when these brises mention about what the difference is, it seems to leave out other things as well. So we can't really bring a proof from them because it left out teva. So now the Gemara says, Lav Shiurahu, you know what? It left out teva, the Gemara says. You know why it left out to mention about the ark? That the middle 3 fasts. You don't bring the ark to the public square. In the last 7, you do bring the ark to the public square. It didn't mention that. You know why? Because you know what? It's going to talk about in the tractate, the second chapter, the other chapter. It's going to mention it and it's going to really discuss it all about that. So it left it for that. It it's part of the Mishnah in the second part of the second chapter of our tractate, and therefore it doesn't talk about it in the differences. That it leaves it up to there. So the Gemara says, you know what? Hashadasis lahachi. Now that we mentioned that, it leaves something because it mentions it in the Mishnah there, so it leaves it for there and it doesn't mention it as one of the differences. Esrim v'yarba nami lav shiuru. You could say the same thing. The 24 brachas, it doesn't mention it here. Why doesn't it mention it when it talks about the differences? Because it leaves it out because it mentions it in that second parak as well. The Katani Labidach Pirka. It teaches it there about those 24 brachas. So implying that the other set of 3, you don't do it at. You only do it there. So in other words, there's a source, a place where it seems to tell us that you're not going to do these, and therefore it leaves it out. It says it there that the last 7 fasts, you bring the ark to the public square. What does that imply? Maybe the other fasts, you don't do that. It says the last 7, you say 24 brachas. What does that imply? The last, the other 3s, you don't do it at. So therefore, it leaves it out. So what comes out? So what comes out from this is that we possibly could say that the meaning of the original brisa that we've been dealing with, that we're trying to figure out what it means. Does an individual ever make a bracha on a fast day as a separate bracha in the Shemoneh Esrei, and sort of like change the format of the Shemoneh Esrei for his individual fast or in his individual Shemoneh Esrei? What comes out is no, he really doesn't. And there are fast days that the Shliach Tzibur will do that. The Shliach Tzibur sometimes will make a bracha. The Shliach Tzibur, if the Chazan is fasting, he says he'll say the Anenu prayer, and it says a bracha of its own right. And that was one of the brisa. That was that first brisa that we were trying to explain and understand. He will say a bracha of its own right, but an individual never does that. And the where it talks about the first fast days, it doesn't mention about the 24 brachas, because the first 3 fast days you don't do 24 brachas, and even though maybe the middle ones you would do the 24 brachas, and it says there's no difference between the first and the second. Could be that where it says there's no difference is only talking about it's not talking about the davening differences. It's talking about prohibition differences. Or you could say that even the middle ones also don't have the 24 brachas. But what are you going to do? The fact that there are places where it says that the middle 3 fasts and the last 7 are all the same. You know, it sounds like they both have 24 brachas. It's not a problem. It didn't mention the 24 brachas as a difference because it relies on the fact that it mentions it in the second parak. It mentions clearly that the last 7 have those 24 brachas, implying that maybe the middle 3 don't. Of course, the first 3 don't. And therefore, you could say that the first 3 are very similar to the second 3 fasts, that neither of them have those 24 brachas. And basically, the only place where you have the 24 brachas is in the last 7 fasts. Now, so what comes out from this? What would come out is that individuals, when they say their Anenu prayer, what seemingly would come out is that you do not make a bracha on its own. You sort of slip it into the generic bracha called the Shema Tefillah bracha, and that's where you say it. Now, the Chazan, he would probably say it on, as a separate bracha of his own. So the Gemara says, "My havi Allah." So what is with regard to our question that we started off with? Yeah, yes, David.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out all these differences and all these different details are reflected in our present day davening, except for the ark. Like where are we bringing the ark into the streets and out of the shul? Like how does that connect to the present day davening of our fasts?
Not really, and we also don't have 24 blessings added, so we don't really have either of these. Yeah. So the Gemara says,
but the ark thing itself, like we don't do any of that stuff.
Right.
It's not connected to Kriyas Torah.
The point is, it had to do with the fast days for rain. When was the last time you fasted for rain?
I get it. Okay.
So the Gemara says, "My havi Allah." So what is the law regarding the ani? So it comes out that it's a machlokes. Amar Shmuel bar Sasrutoi, v'chein Amar Chia bar Ashi Amar Rab, bein goy l'reife, that an individual would say a bracha of its own as a separate bracha between Goyel, the bracha of Goyel Yisrael and Reife. Rav Ashi Amar Mishmeid Rav Yanai Berei de Rav Yishmael b'Shemet Tefillah, and Rav Ashi in the name of Rav Yanai and the son of Rav Yishmael, he says it in Shemet Tefillah. V'hilchasa b'Shemet Tefillah. And the halacha, the final halacha, is that you say it in the Shemet Tefillah, meaning you don't say a bracha, you don't make an extra bracha of its own right. And what comes out is that even in a public fast, the individual doesn't say the anenu even in a public fast. You basically you just say it as an individual, and it's only the chazan who says it as a public fast. And that's basically the conclusion over here, that the hilchasa, which is the final halacha, which is what we do. But there was a machlokes. It seems like maybe they debated, when it was seemingly they're debating even in individual fast, like should an individual say the bracha of its own in its own right, goyel reife. Anyway, that's the machlokes here. This is the argument, and the final conclusion. We know what the halach is. We do it every fast day. Anyway, sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.